Imagine that you are a successful and particularly patriotic business person that wants to buy a car that represents both your wealth and your love of country. If you're German, you buy a Maybach. A Brit buys a Bentley. And an American like me, I don't know, I guess you'd sell your F-150 and buy an F-250. But if you're from here in China, I think you might just try and buy one of these, a Hongqi L1 or Guoya. As a car reviewer, I spend a whole lot of time out on the road, so nobody knows better than I do that things can get pretty crazy out there. The things I've seen. And that's why I recommend staying protected with today's sponsor, the Wolfbox G900 Pro Mirror Dash Cam. The G900 Pro offers added peace of mind by combining a 4K front camera and 2.5K rear camera for full coverage, capturing clear images even in bright daylight and ensuring details such as license plates can be seen at night. The upgraded 5.8 GHz Wi-Fi with app connectivity means video transmission speeds of 8 megabytes per second. But for maximum convenience and safety, the G900 Pro also comes with voice controls for a variety of functions. Switch to rear camera. We can't bring you videos without support from sponsors like Wolfbox, so click the link below to learn how you can get your G900 Pro now.
Welcome to Wheelsboy, where we cover the newest, coolest, and wildest vehicles from the Chinese car market. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell.
Note that I said you would try to buy one of these, because there's more than purchasing one of China's most expensive vehicles than simply going to a dealership and coughing up the $200,000 to $260,000 US asking price. For starters, there's only 4 of those dealerships in the entire country, and since this thing can be customized in so many ways, you really got to go to a dealership to talk to a salesperson and figure out what it's going to look like. Also, if you show up to that dealership looking to finance the purchase with a loan, they're going to tell you to kick rocks. That's because this thing is all or nothing. You either buy it all up front or you don't buy it at all. If you have the money and you're willing to pay it all up front, they're still going to check your credit history first. And if you've got any black spots on that history, let's say you took out a loan and didn't pay it back, or you've got a history of bankruptcy, well, you, my friend, are not Guoya material. Maybe you could check out the Mercedes-Benz dealership next door. I hear they'll sell the car to absolutely anybody. But seriously, it does seem like Hongqi is going out of their way to make it more difficult to purchase a car that already has a very small pool of potential buyers, i.e. somebody who has the money to buy a Maybach or even a used Bentley and instead chooses to get one of these. I think this is partially, okay, it's mostly a marketing effort. It's meant to make it feel more special to those potential buyers, but there's also an aspect of needing to protect the brand. You see, this is part of the Sunflower series, which is used to transport China's highest level officials, as well as visiting foreign dignitaries. So they need to be careful that they don't associate that brand with the undesirable elements. It wouldn't behoove them then to sell the Guoya to, I don't know, a Bitcoin scammer or a real estate mogul with a history of bankruptcy. So let's say that you have the money and the burning sense of national pride necessary to walk out of a Sunflower dealer with the keys to a Guoya. What are you getting for your money? For starters, you get a behemoth of a sedan, 5.35 meters in length and nearest makes no difference, 2 meters wide with a wheelbase of over 3.2 meters. Numbers that are good enough to rival or even better a Bentley Flying Spur. As for styling, well, something of a combination of a Rolls-Royce, a Bentley, and a Cadillac. But dismissing this thing as a copycat and calling it a day would be doing both you and this car a disservice. That's because there are a lot of really interesting details buried in this design, most of which refer back to either the Sunflower series or Chinese history and culture. Again, the Sunflower series is how they refer to Hongqi's highest level of vehicles, and includes, in addition to the Guoya, vehicles like the H9 Plus, the Guoya or LS7 SUV, and the range-topping Guoli, previously known as the L5. That's the $1 million+ sedan that's used to transport Chinese Chairman Xi Jinping around the country. That one's also the hardest one to buy. You see, in addition to checking your credit history, they're also going to look into your political history to make sure that you are, again, a desirable buyer for the brand.
The logo for the Sunflower series isn't what you might call subtle, but it is certainly eye-catching. You can find hints of the sunflower motif all over the car, including sunflower petals in the headlights, the taillights, and the pattern on the lower corner of the fascia.
This is also a light, by the way, but it won't light up until Hongqi gets approval from regulators, which the owner of this car tells me should be happening in the second half of this year. Speaking of the owner, these are not standard. They are his personal edition, but I told him to leave them on. I thought they kind of captured the vibe. What does work here and now is this retractable light-up hood ornament. This is in the shape of wings, and aft of it is a red lighting strip that also, again, lights up. This is supposed to represent a red flag, which is what Hongqi means in Chinese. Are you starting to understand why I told him to just leave the flags on the side of the car? This emblem is at a tilt of 23.5 degrees, the same angle as the Earth's axis, which points towards the North Star in the night sky.
The wing motif appears again as a puddle light that springs from the side of the car when you unlock it. If that's a bit too low-key for you, then you'll probably enjoy the giant emblem that also projects onto the ground when you open the door.
This version of the Guoya rides on 19-inch wheels wrapped in 255 Continental rubber front and rear. They're not particularly big, but that does mean they have more tire, which should result in a slightly better ride. Behind those wheels are Brembo brakes. One more note about the design of the lights on this car, both front and rear. According to the designer at Hongqi that I spoke with, he said they needed inspiration for this car, and so they asked for access to the Forbidden Palace in Beijing. They weren't just given access to the Forbidden Palace, they were given access to forbidden areas of the Forbidden Palace that normal people like you or me wouldn't be able to see. Apparently it's in there that they were able to find the art style that gave them the inspiration for the interior of this light. One more other design element that I want to point out is the Hongqi logo itself. These Chinese characters are written in a very special font because this isn't just any font. This is what it would look like if Chairman Mao hand wrote the characters of Hongqi. If we pop open the trunk here, we will find 380 liters of space, which isn't particularly big for a car of this size, but it's actually larger than the 351 liters of a Bentley Continental Flying Spur Hybrid, and it's compromised for the same reason. This thing has a battery pack underneath the floor here measuring 2 kilowatt hours. Unlike the Bentley, however, it has no official pure electric range. Personally, I've gotten behind the wheel and I would say it can probably go, I don't know, roughly 10 kilometers on pure EV.
If you'd like to come to China and experience Chinese electric vehicles for yourself, you might just be the ideal candidate for the Wheelsboy EV Tour. Each year, Wheelsboy is going to be putting on multiple events where we invite our fans to join me here in China to get hands-on with Chinese electric vehicles like this. If that sounds interesting, email us at tour@wheelsboy.cn to learn more.
Let us pretend for a moment that I, instead of being a lowly car reviewer with a head cold, am the esteemed ambassador from the United States, headed for a high-level meeting with Chinese officials, and I'm being transported in the Guoya. What would that experience be like? It would be a very spacious experience, at least when it came to legroom, but when it comes to headroom, I have to say it's not quite as big as I would expect from a car in this class. There's plenty for me. I'm 1.75 meters, or about 5.9 inches tall, but if I was, say, the ambassador from the Netherlands, I might find it to be a tight fit. Something I think you'll enjoy regardless of your nation of origin are these seats, because they are incredibly soft and, unlike so many Chinese cars that I review, incredibly supportive as well. They are trimmed in not just Nappa leather, but S Nappa, which is apparently an even higher level of Nappa leather that they trim from the regular Nappa, and then they find the best of the Nappa to make S Nappa leather. It really does feel much nicer than the other Nappa leather that I often experience in Chinese cars. It feels a little bit more close to natural leather, and it feels so thick and soft. These seats also are, of course, super adjustable, accomplished either via the buttons here on the door panel where you can go, let's see, there we go. We can also do our backrest, and we can even adjust the height and distance of our headrest here. This button here would adjust the leg rest if this car had one. That's not the only blank button on the interior of this 200,000 not RMB, sorry, 200,000 USD car. And I have to say, I wish that they had figured out a more elegant solution than just putting a dead button on here. It also, of course, has ventilated, heated, and massaging seats. And because this is a true luxury experience, you can get whatever you want, even if what you want is for it to be cooled and heated at the same time. I'm entirely unsure why you would want to have a cooled and heated seat at the same time, but again, if you're paying this much money, you should get whatever you want. If you want to control this via something other than the physical buttons, you can fold down the center armrest here, where you will find a 7-inch touchscreen that allows you to control not just the functions for the seats, including moving it back and forth, but obviously the lighting in here, the overhead sunroof, and the media. What makes this kind of special, however, is if you hit this button, you can pop it out. And then you can just, I don't know, do whatever you want with it. Hold it, give it to your friend, let them use it. Seems pretty easy to lose, but I guess this makes it a little bit more special than your average rear screen. Putting this back where it belongs, right here. That's actually a very satisfying click. You will find behind that another storage cubby, which has some storage space over here on the right, and a wireless charging pad for your phone. Further aft, you'll find a little storage compartment. Now, in higher spec versions of this car, this would be a refrigerated and heated area. In addition to the wireless charging pad that you have here, you've also got 2 more USB charging ports right down here. I'll be honest, there's a ton of cars that are much cheaper than this here in China that have pretty much all of the features that I've just described to you. This one, however, does have some things that you won't find in other Chinese cars, including some really interesting references to Chinese culture and art. Take, for example, the shanshui, or mountain and water motif that you find here on these metal speaker grills. It's very beautiful in daylight, and it's even more beautiful at night when using the mood lighting. The same motif can be found here on the lower door speaker as well. Up above you, you have this very interesting floating centerpiece that's attached to the ceiling with a gorgeous pattern inside of it that, again, works really well with the mood lighting. Let us, however, return to reality, where I'm much less likely to be driven around in a Guoya than I am to be tasked with driving somebody more important than me in the Guoya. So, let's sit in the front seat. This actually isn't the first time we've been inside of a Guoya. That would have been at the 2024 Beijing Auto Show when this car debuted. Those show cars had very flamboyant interiors, much more flamboyant than the more conservative approach that this car's owner has taken. Instead of the colorful kind of textile material we saw in those show cars, this has a carbon fiber looking material, but when you look more closely at it, you realize that it's not actually carbon fiber, at least I'm quite confident it isn't. It's actually some sort of, textile looking thing that's been covered in a plastic coating. It looks cooler and cooler the closer and closer you look at it. Let's continue our exploration of this front row with the steering wheel. In addition to being wrapped in some of the softest leather that I have ever touched, it also has one of the coolest horns that I've ever seen. This is obviously modeled after cars from the 50s and 60s, and it's actually a lever that you pull instead of a button that you push. It is specifically modeled after the Hongqi CA770, a classic Hongqi of sorts, and one that has continued to inspire Hongqis to the present day. This car does, however, have some very modern technology as well, starting with the digital instrument cluster here, as well as a 14.2-inch touchscreen display. This display's UI is, I would say largely similar to that of regular Hongqi models, and it's not the fastest I've ever experienced, not the smoothest. I would suspect that the computing power isn't up to the same as, say, a Neo ET9 or a Yangwang U7 or some of these other high-end Chinese sedans, but it's certainly usable. As a wristwatch enthusiast, I cannot help but point out that I love the dashboard-mounted clock right here. It's got the Hongqi logo, and it's also got 1958 written inside of it, which of course is when Hongqi was founded. Working our way south, below that 14.2-inch screen, we have a row of physical buttons, always nice to see, and those buttons, their sensation is actually quite nice. It's very tactile, kind of mechanical feel to it. There is some storage in this center console, but it's a little hard to find. You don't press this or push it, you actually hit this button right here, and then it slowly, elegantly reveals itself to you. The buttons here on the center console are crystal, which I normally would not like, but I think they work on this interior more than they do on the Chinese smart EVs that I normally review. There it feels like kind of a conflict, but this feels like traditional luxury, and this car feels like a traditional luxury vehicle. Between the buttons is a wireless charging pad, but oh, I almost forgot. This button right here is used to open and close, or really just open, your glove box. If you notice this black spot here, that's because it can be fingerprint protected. So you can register your fingerprint so only you can open the glove box. They haven't done that, so we can just open it on our own. Finally, back here, underneath we have a pretty small storage space with 2 USB charging ports. Now, we must get around to a few of my complaints about the interior of this car. As I think I've already established, the interior materials are very, very nice. Tons of Napa leather. You've got real metal pieces like the paddles on the back of the wheel, as well as the lever for the horn that I mentioned before. Everything else is soft touch or this cool kind of carbon fiber looking, whatever textile material. There are a few things, however, that I think don't live up to the price point. For example, there are a significant number of blanks. As I showed you in the back, the button that's used to adjust the leg rest is there, but there is no leg rest. Here in the front row, you've also got blanks down here in the center console. I just don't like to see that on a car this expensive. There's also some blanks, by the way, on that fold-down center armrest. And the cup holder on that fold-down center armrest is stuck. I mean, it sometimes opens, but mostly it doesn't open. Finally, and this is a very small complaint, this button right here is used to open the door. I would accept this button on a much cheaper Chinese EV, but it just doesn't seem fitting with this car. It has so much ceremony to it. All the design, all the style, the size. It feels like it should have a nice big button, or rather a nice big lever ideally, but either way, this just doesn't seem big enough or nice enough to fit with this car's status. We're finally about to get this thing on the road, and if we're going to do that, we're going to need a key. You've actually been looking at the key of this car the entire time I've been in the front row, but you didn't know it. That's because it's this right here. This beautiful, smooth, pebble-like object is the key to the Hongqi Guoya. It is gorgeous. It has a gorgeous pattern to it, and it has an incredibly hefty weight that makes it feel like it's worth like $1 million. My favorite part, though, is the fact that you can put it into this perfect round little dish where it melds into the interior in a way that you're simply not going to have in a car which has a normal key you just throw into the cup holder. I'm quite confident that this dish and this shape come from some aspect of Chinese culture or history, but I can't seem to find out where. If you know, please feel free to let me know in the comments section below. In the meantime, let's go for a drive. All right, as I pull onto this road, I have to remember the fact that the front end of this car is roughly 50 meters in length. So while I am very far from the road, the front is probably already halfway into it. There we go. When it comes time to transport foreign dignitaries, smoothness is of the utmost importance. And in that respect, the Guoya is an absolute weapon. Everything this does is so smooth from behind the wheel. The steering, the acceleration, the braking, the shifts from the 8-speed automatic transmission all feel like freshly churned butter. But then, you can drop it into sport mode. In which case it becomes, to borrow a phrase from a friend of mine, an executive express, kind of a iron fist in a velvet glove. While this thing does not have the twin turbocharged 4-liter V8 hybrid engine that the top spec car has, it does have a 3-liter turbocharged V6 with an electric motor for a total of 290 kilowatts or about 400 horsepower. That's good enough for a 0 to 100 of 4.8 seconds, which is plenty fast for a car this big. This car has 18 degrees of rear steer as standard, so it is pretty maneuverable for something this long. Last night I had to put it into a parking space at the hotel, and I found it to be surprisingly easy. That is definitely going to come in handy because you don't want to spend half an hour trying to pull your car into the parking space when you got a foreign dignitary in the back seat. One way in which this car truly surprised me is the fact that I kind of expected it to be more of a upgraded version of a Hongqi. Basically a Hongqi Plus, but it's not. This doesn't drive anything like a regular Hongqi. Even the most expensive Hongqi I've ever driven, the Hongqi HS9, which at the time was a $100,000 car, really feels like a much, much cheaper vehicle than this from behind the wheel. This feels premium. An interesting thought experiment when it comes to this car is to think about it in comparison to some of the other high-end Chinese sedans you can buy. I'm thinking about the Neo ET9 or the Yangwang U7. Both of those have very advanced hydraulic suspensions instead of the dual-chamber air suspension that you get on this car. They've also got, at least in the case of the U7, oodles more power. That one's got 1,300 horsepower, around 1,000 kilowatts. This, again, isn't nearly as high performance and doesn't have that high of tech. But I do think it does deliver something that those cars, for all their advanced technology, do not. Namely, I'm talking about a sense of ceremony. When I was behind the wheel of a Neo ET9, it felt very impressive. It did things that I've never seen another sedan do when it came to ride, for example. It also had the wireless steering and all this other stuff. But there was a certain lack of majesty, ceremony. And that is something that this car delivers in a way that no other Chinese car I've ever driven does. Does it drive or ride as well as a Rolls-Royce, a Bentley, or even a Maybach? No, I do not think that it does. But it feels like much more of an occasion from behind the wheel. Partially that's because you're looking out over a hood that measures roughly 50 meters in length, and you're looking at a pretty awesome emblem that pops out of the hood, but it's just the whole package. The look of it, the styling on the inside, the presentation. It feels majestic. Who then is the potential customer for this car? I haven't met very many of them. In fact, I've only met one. It's the guy who owns this car. Super nice guy who rented it to us, and he is, one, much younger than you probably think. My stereotype was that he had to be at least, like 50, 60, even 70 years old? He's 36. Why he bought the car? One, he likes the way it looks. Two, he's a bit of a patriot. He loves China. And three, he loves Hongqi. He originally had a Hongqi H5, then he upgraded to an H9, and then he went on to this. The other, fourth reason, is that he bought it because he's in the wedding business, and he rents this car out to be used as part of wedding parties, so it's kind of a business expense. But based on how much junk he had in the trunk of this car when we were filming it and we had to move around, he does use this car as a daily driver as well. I also think it makes a bit of sense considering the fact that, again, he's in the wedding industry, one that is all about pomp and circumstance. And this car is nothing if not pomp and circumstance. I imagine a potential owner for the Hongqi Guoya is somebody that prioritizes ceremony over technology, majesty over outright performance, And of course, also has a perfect credit history and has 200,000 USD in cash that they can drop on a car at the tip of a hat. Anyways, they gotta be a pretty special person. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram, links in the description below. And as always, like, subscribe, and hit the bell.